Okay.
All right, welcome everybody to our event, The Evolving Role of AI in Libraries, Opportunities, Challenges, and the Future. We have a very special guest with us today, Heather Sardis. She is the Associate Director for Technology and Strategic Planning at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT Libraries. Heather, welcome. Thanks for being here. How are you?
I am doing very well, Eddie. Thank you. And thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah, and you are no stranger to San Jose State University, right? You did the library 2.0, was it?
Yeah, that's right. I have lots of touch points. I did the Library 2.0 conference. I work with Dr. Stevens on the technology board for the iSchool. Um, and I was telling folks when I first logged on, my first job out of grad school or out of grad school, out of library school was at the Computer History Museum, which is in Mountain View, right near San Jose. So all of my early friends and colleagues in the library profession graduated from San Jose State, so it's very close to my heart.
Cool, great. So I want to welcome everybody else too to the event. And if you do have a question during the event, feel free to put it in the chat there, and hopefully we can get to it. We also got a few questions from the registration process from some attendees, so hopefully we can get to those. Good, Heather. Let's say we start with our first question. So the first one topic is how libraries are using AI in their services and their workflows. So have you seen anything about how libraries are currently using AI?
Yeah, definitely. So I hope it's okay. I brought lots of links with me. So I'll probably be dropping things in the chat and talking about them. One of the most useful links that I wanted to share is this um, inventory of Gen AI tools that are in use in higher ed. It's not specific to libraries, but Ithaca, the organization that put it together, they do work with a lot of libraries, especially in the higher ed space. And so they're tracking AI tools that are being used for discovery, accessibility, and a lot of other purposes. So that's a great reference to have. And I think some of the main areas that academic libraries in particular, but libraries more broadly are putting AI to use right now are in the discovery process. So when you come to the websites, you're doing discovery and you're searching, there's a lot of focus right now on natural language search. So basically enabling people to interact with library catalogs using natural language the same way that you would talk with a large language model. And that is, it's starting to offer an alternative to Boolean style searching. And the prediction is that it will eventually overtake Boolean style searching. So a lot of folks are experimenting with that right now, but I would expect to see more of it in the next 3 to 5 years. Um, a lot of library vendors are starting to roll out AI supported search or natural language search. One example that I know a lot of schools are experimenting with is the JSTOR research tool. So that might be a fun one to experiment with. Um, and some of the other applications are for accessibility. Um, a lot of places are using tools like Whisper for speech to text to create transcripts and improve accessibility for not only meetings, but services and workshops, etc. Um, a tool that I've heard a lot about, but we're not yet using at MIT, is Transcribus. So places that are serving user populations that speak many different languages. A tool like Transcribus uses AI to do language translation. Um, and then just generic generative AI tools are getting a lot of uptake and use. So ChatGPT, Llama, etc., just to support text creation, administrative functions, scheduling, kind of the basics of running a library. we're starting to see a lot of uptake of more generalized Gen AI tools there. So that's what I'm seeing right now.
And thank you, Heather. And are you seeing anything for on the side of for librarians, like their workflows? Are they using any AI for that, like metadata or anything like that?
Yes, definitely. I think what's there's what is in use now, and then there's what is kind of coming down the pipeline. In use now, people are definitely utilizing AI for descriptive metadata. I think it requires a lot of hands-on human oversight, human leadership, because the AI tools that are available right now are not quite able to perform at the level that human catalogers can. Um, and there's a lot of AI research happening at the moment that it's not quite available to us or on the market, but there are teams at MIT, for example, that are working on using natural language processing to solve some metadata problems. Like one example, there's a research team that is working on filling in names and affiliations. So like, Heather Sardis, MIT, for legacy data. I think they're working with housing records, like legacy databases of housing records, and where there is name and affiliation data missing, they're using natural language processing to kind of speculate and fill in the gaps. Um, Another application that's currently under development is utilizing natural language processing to repair OCR. So, for me, who graduated from library school back in 2007, we've done a lot of OCR of digitized material, and some of the earlier tools were functional but not great. So the OCR text that you would get out is not always intelligible. It might not fully make sense, and most libraries don't have the resources to go back and re-OCR this older material. So applications where maybe a Gen AI or a natural language tool can take that sort of bad, less functional OCR text and turn it into something that is likely to be accurate. That seems like a really interesting or promising way to address some of those issues.
And what is OCR, Heather, for just to clarify, if anybody, in case nobody.
Yeah, sorry about that. OCR is optical character recognition. And so it's a technology where, let's say you digitize a thesis, like a text document, you can utilize an optical character recognition tool to look at that image and recognize the text and then generate a digital text transcript, like a text file. So that makes the content of those scans searchable. So instead of just having raw image files that depict the text, you'd actually have like a digital and searchable copy of the text. And so what tends to happen, especially with older OCR, is the tool might not be able to read the text. It has a lot of trouble reading handwriting. It may misspell things or miss words or just misinterpret words. And so these research teams are working on utilizing natural language processing to repair that text based on what the most likely word would have been in that context. It can also look at the original images and reinterpret them. So.
Mhm. Is there such a thing as like an OCR, but for images, like photographs? Can AI look at a photograph, let's say, and create descriptive metadata for it?
Um, it It can, but I would say it requires a lot of handling at this stage. Um, I think what I always say to folks that I'm working with is where we're at right now with AI is it's really just within the last 3 to 5 years that the technology, at least when it comes to generating text or generating descriptions, it's just become affordable, accessible, and functional enough to be relevant to the type of work that we do in libraries. but it has a long way to go, especially in things like interpreting what you see in an image and then turning that into usable and accurate text. Image recognition and image interpretation is still evolving, I guess I would say.
Thank you, Heather. All right, and just a reminder, if anybody has a question, please put it in the chat and we will try our best to get to it. Let's move on to our next question. How can libraries ensure that the use of AI aligns with their values of privacy, intellectual freedom, and equity? Hmm.
Yeah, this is a fabulous question. It's one of my favorite questions, and it's one of my favorite topics. So thank you for asking. And I think one of the touchstones that I keep returning to is a philosophy or an approach that is called human-centered AI. And actually, near to San Jose State at Stanford, there is the Human-Centered AI Institute, HCAI. That was founded, I think, about 5 years ago. I might have the dates wrong, by Dr. Fei Li, who is a pioneer of computer imaging. So the very technologies that are used to generate text from images, she was a huge part of a lot of that work in computer vision. And she, out of concerns that she had for ethics and the way that especially large technology companies were integrating or not integrating ethics into their decision making about AI, that inspired her to found this human-centered AI Institute and really explore um, the ways that AI can be implemented that align with human well-being, societal well-being, the values that I think libraries share: openness, transparency, trust, inclusion, belonging. So I'm just really drawn to human-centered AI. And let me just check back in my notes to pull out a couple of useful links. I think it's the AI philosophy that I feel is the closest to the values that drive our own profession. And it really seeks to ensure that AI is implemented in a way that augments human skills and augments human work, but doesn't replace it and doesn't seek to displace those of us that are working in knowledge professions, especially. And it seeks to advance, incentivize, and place value around uses of AI that contribute to human well-being and human dignity. Um, so I'll stop there because it's a topic that I could easily go on for many hours, but I'll hand it back to you, Eddie.
Yeah, it's a good topic. Topic. I think most people are interested in it. So, if we can continue just a little bit on it, just because you said human centered, right? Are we, is part of that, does that part of that mean control? Like
Mhm.
we shouldn't relinquish too much control or still
Yeah,
maintain control?
yeah, absolutely. And that I think is a huge part of a human-centered approach to AI. If you're reading about AI, you might be seeing a phrase that has been popping up more and more lately that is agentic AI. Um, what that means is not it, not using AI as a tool or a technology, but using it as an agent. So a tool that you might delegate decisions to. So instead of you as the human making a decision in your organization, you're asking AI to make that decision for you. Human-centered AI has a lot of different components to it, but one of the main ones is ensuring that where we are deploying AI and where we're using it, especially if we as librarians are choosing to use it in ways that touch our patrons, that there's always human oversight. There's always human review of what the AI is producing, human intervention to make sure that if we're utilizing an AI, that it is behaving in the ways that we expect it to and behaving in ways that promote our values. Um, and really doing like regular maintenance and checkups and utilizing analytics and metrics to measure how the AI is behaving and make decisions to not use AI where possible and make decisions that when you're evaluating an AI tool, for example, like if I, as a technology director, am looking at a particular AI tool that we might want to add to our search interface, if we're looking at that through a human-centered AI lens, we're going to ask, like, does the vendor or the company that built this tool share our values? What were the values that went into creating this tool? What was the data that was used to train this tool? So it prescribes a lot of human oversight, to go back to your original question, Eddie.
Yeah, thank you. What about like ethical frameworks? Like I know we have like the ALA code of ethics. Is that what should guide us in this in AI as well?
Yeah,
Or
I think it, I feel like right now we're seeing an explosion of ethical frameworks, especially coming from libraries in higher ed. Actually, I have another link that I brought to share. This is like a huge compendium of AI guidelines produced by universities all around the world. And you'll see when you get in and you start scrolling, there's just more and more and more. So everybody is thinking about ethical frameworks and everybody is having conversations about like what are ethics in the context of libraries and then how do we apply those to decision making around technology and AI. Um, some of the ethical frameworks that I like, let's see, actually, there's one that was published a couple of years ago by an organization called Equal AI. I'll put the link in the Zoom chat. Um, it's a pretty expansive white paper on um, how to design and operationalize a responsible AI ethics framework in an organization. And it touches on not only like the guidelines that an organization would follow, but if you, as a library staff or a library worker, um, are helping to create ethical guidelines in your organization or in your school, like how do you go about doing that? What sort of conversations should you have? And then how do you set that up as a governance model?
great, thank you, Heather. Let's see. Okay, we can move on to the next question. For topic, how should LIS programs prepare future professionals for working with AI technologies? We
Yeah.
all want to know that because we're all, I think we're all students here, except you, Heather.
I am a student of life, so I am always learning, especially when it comes to AI.
Nice.
I always, if you're looking at a technology like this that's in its infancy and you have questions, that's exactly right, because that's where we are right now. And so the question that you just asked, I think it mirrors the question that Katie asked in the chat as well. What AI do you think that AI skills should be taught to college students? And I'm very excited about this question because actually Dr. Stevens at the iSchool has posed that question to myself and the other members of the technology board. So we've been having that discussion over several months, and I checked in with him, like, is it okay if I share what we've been doing and what we've decided because it will manifest itself in the school. So he's very enthusiastic and he gave me the go ahead to share. So I am going to copy paste into the chat. Um, so the Technology Advisory Board has been discussing like what are some of the key skills that library students will need kind of going into the profession and being the next generation of folks that will build and shape libraries into the future. Um, and we've been discussing, listing, and prioritizing those. And here are the ones that have risen up to the top of the list. Um, they're not necessarily specific to AI, but I would say that they all support responsible decision making when it comes to AI. Because at the end of the day, like AI is a tool and it is a technology. And so the same approaches that we take to technology decision making in libraries should ultimately apply to AI. But there's like a little bit of startup to get to know AI as a technology. So anyway, with that framing, um, one of the top skills is data and computation. So just understanding good and responsible data management practices, especially in an academic library environment, is a perennial skill. And when we say computational skills, it it refers to technology in libraries, but it also, at least in the context of my library, it refers to people making computational use of collections. So accessing collections through APIs, um, downloading, for example, like all of the open text in the MIT libraries, and then using that to train a large language model. That's something that would fall under computational skills. And so, like we have a lot of librarians in our library that know how to support researchers that want to access collections in those ways. So that's a really fabulous skill set. Um, in a general sense, information and digital literacy. So just exactly the types of conversations that we're having right now, like getting to know these tools, getting to know what the risks are, what the concerns are, how to mitigate those risks, and how to shepherd patrons through decision making when they're exploring using AI tools. I think all of that falls into information and digital literacy. Metadata and discovery, probably very familiar to you all as library students. And uh, skills that are not going anywhere anytime soon. Like metadata and discovery, I would say, are chief among our concerns on a day-to-day basis in the library. Security and privacy, I think that is a useful set of skills, especially on the technology side of the house. And I think it entails understanding how to work with the data audit teams at your institution and understanding how to ensure data privacy for patrons. That's something that is, I think, really core to the library profession and something that sets us as librarians and library workers apart from a lot of the tech companies and a lot of the more commercial information ventures that we in libraries hold patron data privacy paramount, and really seek to advocate for our patrons and protect their privacy when they're in our environments. So knowing how that manifests in the tools and the platforms that we maintain is a really useful skill, especially in an AI-enabled environment. And then equity, ethics, and human-centered practices. My number one, again, it's going to invite me right back down the path. So I will only go there if you want me to elaborate. But I think really not only understanding our professional ethics and our professional values, like the ALA library profession values, for example, but understanding your own personal values as a library student, as a library worker, and as somebody who is taking up what I think is some of the most inspiring work in the world, which is ensuring that people have free, open, and generous access to information. Um, Especially in today's environment, I think really understanding your personal values and how those map to our professional values as librarians, and then how those values can drive the decision making that you'll be doing in the library profession. That is an evergreen skill, and it's something that that we will all be called upon to utilize every day that we're working as librarians.
Thank you, Heather. Let's take a question from the audience, from Jenna. They ask, from the bit of exploration I've done with AI for research, I'm skeptical about its ability to reliably extract accurate information about niche topics. Have you seen library users become over reliant on large language models for research without fact checking the outputs? So basically,
Yes,
they're just asking, are they not fact checking?
yes, absolutely. It's a huge risk. Um, I think, yeah, I mean, anecdotally, I think we've probably all had some experience of using a large language model and having it very confidently present us with like blatantly inaccurate information. Um, so on a personal note, my husband is Greek and I am studying Greek to be able to speak more with his family and my family. And sometimes I'll use a large language model to practice verbs or practice like parts of speech. And sometimes it will lead me down such an incorrect path, and it is so confident about it. So I think it's a really excellent question because absolutely, yes. We see students, patrons. It's very seductive to speak in natural language. And so if there is a tool that enables people to information seek using natural language, that is a draw. And if you are utilizing that tool in lieu of fact checking, in lieu of other tools, it's very difficult, I find, for people that are not studying information retrieval and not studying information literacy, as we all are or have a while ago in my case. Um, it's hard for people to make that distinction and to know when they're getting trustworthy information or not. And so I think in a way, I would say it's good for libraries because it means that the sort of things that we have to offer our patrons are more critical than ever. Um, Teaching information literacy, teaching critical thinking, teaching how to differentiate between information that you're getting from a search engine or a chat tool versus vetted information from a trusted source. It's even more critical now that the volume of information is sort of like exponentially larger because we have access to everything through large language models. Let me reread the question. I think, Jenna, your skepticism is well placed. And it's interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a board meeting for one of the very large library vendors. And they were talking about how what they're finding from their user testing is that users are drawn to natural language search tools far more than Boolean searches, even if they know that it's less accurate. They would so prefer that type of interaction that they're willing to sacrifice accuracy. And we had a conversation about like, well, it would be really helpful if when you got those results, you saw like a confidence score. Like, is the tool 90% confident that this is accurate because it has these vetted sources, or is it 10% confident because it made up the answer because that's what it's programmed to do? And I would love to see large language models and chat tools start to include things like that. I think that's what an ethical and human-centered large language model would look like, is it gives you an insight into its process and it gives you an insight into where its information came from. Um, Remains to be seen if that is a feature that will be rolled out. So I'll stop there. But yeah, I think skepticism is well placed, but it also just reinforces the importance of the type of services that we deliver in libraries.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. Let's go to the next question. It's about budget constraints. So,
Mm.
how do budget constraints affect the ability of libraries, especially smaller or under-resourced ones, to implement AI solutions? And I mean, these are like, other countries and like underdeveloped maybe countries, right? That because it's not just here in the U.S., obviously. So,
Yep.
um, what do you think about that?
Yeah, this is such a timely question. And actually from our original conversation, Eddie, to now, The budgetary landscape has changed so dramatically, even just with something like the dismantling of IMLS that has had huge rippling effects on libraries, not just in the US, but globally. And even before that, there was already significant concern about digital divides between um, wealthier countries and countries that don't have the level of resources to be able to purchase increasingly commercialized AI tools. So I think I'm going to take a second and just post another resource in chat. It's a book that I love called Power and Progress. Um, there's a subtitle that I can't quite remember the whole thing. It's like Power and Progress 1,000 years of technology, something, something. But it's by two economists, Daron Acemoglu, and I'm typing it out so that you'll have that, and Simon Johnson. Um, so it's a strongly recommended read from me if you're interested in kind of digging into the economics of technology and the way that technological innovation like AI can further wealth inequality um, within the US, between the US and other countries. And one of the things that they found in their research is that each major technological innovation tends to produce much greater wealth inequality, especially in the first couple of decades of its existence. And they liken the current moment of AI as the current transformative technology to the Industrial Revolution, when mechanization yielded much greater output, and there was kind of this boom of capitalism. And that drastically worsened wealth inequality, and it created labor conditions that were really not human-centered, to go back to that phrase. And that the response to that, the progressive movement, the labor movement, was the way of correcting for those inequalities. And they lay out some ideas for what a current response would look like. Um, so I guess that's kind of a high level response to the question about how are budgets impacting people's ability to implement AI. On a much more kind of local note, it's really difficult because the scale of AI technologies, um, the amount of data that it takes to build and train a large language model, it's vast. And a lot of that is only accessible to the wealthiest technology companies, which means that access to the tools is at a fee. And I think that it's ultimately what I anticipate, let's say 5 years down the road, is that libraries and librarians will evaluate AI tools in the same way that we do other technology tools to support the work that we do. And we try to make do with limited budgets to make the best decisions that we can on behalf of our patrons. And we look to large scale open source software movements, collaborative software movements in academia, to fill in some of those gaps. But it's hard. I mean, it's something that as a technology director, even at an institution like MIT, I think that we struggle with it every day. And when I was working at nonprofits and much smaller institutions, you have to get very creative, I would say, as a librarian to find technology solutions that support patrons.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. Sounds like we really need to be careful about how we proceed with AI, as you mentioned, it could just widen the gaps that are already there. Let's go to another question. This one's from the Q&A one. And this one is really interesting to me because this is one of the first things that I thought of, um, concerning AI and the impact of AI, and it's about the environment. So they ask, are the environmental impacts of AI use be something to consider as libraries and their staff start experimenting with AI tech? So I guess I'm not sure if you can talk a little bit about the impact on the environment that AI is having in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'm not sure if this is the right way to put it, but in a way, I can't say that I'm glad about the environmental impacts of AI, but I'm glad that it's bringing the environmental and climate impacts of technology to the forefront because it's always been a concern and um, it's always been a part of climate change and the climate crisis. But the scale at which AI, training AI, and AI data centers are operating has kind of brought it to the forefront, especially in the conversation among librarians and libraries. So I think there's good in it in the sense that it is getting us talking and aware of energy usage of technology. Um, so I am not the best positioned person to speak on exactly what the impacts are. I can speak a little bit generally about it, and then I can point you to some resources, like a librarian. Um, so uh, I think essentially the major energy usage comes from the data centers where all of this huge amounts of training data are stored and all of the processors are running to train a large language models. That does consume genuinely a significant amount of energy. Um, I think how does it compare to the energy consumption and climate effects of like international air travel? Um, you know, not quite comparable. International air travel is one of the biggest contributors to climate change, side note. But when it comes to AI, it is becoming increasingly a concern because there are more and more companies kind of coming onto the market and doing this type of work and pulling on strained energy systems. Um, and I think our role as librarians, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about under the heading of human-centered AI, that when we're evaluating tools that we might want to use individually or that we might want to add to our technology platforms for our patrons, we need to be asking those questions and we need to ask vendors, like, what is your energy usage? Do you use green computing practices? And expect to get those answers. I think that's kind of a key tool or a key skill for us in libraries across the board when we're examining our personal values, thinking about our professional values, and then using those to drive our decision making is asking, interrogating, and expecting to get answers back on how partners or companies that we're working with interpret those values, and then making decisions based on what we learn. So I think that's one note. The other note that I wanted to share, I'm going to take a quick second to look it up because it's not one of the links that I brought with me. The Harvard libraries are actually, they have a working group within the libraries that is looking at exactly this question. What is the climatological impact of AI? And then how do we incorporate that into decision making in libraries? I'm just going to quickly check and see if they have released their paper yet. They're working on it like right now. Um, um, okay, I'm not seeing it. But I would say that's something to keep an eye out for because it's kind of the first study of its type that I know of. It should be coming out truly like within the next month or so. And they've been working on that for about a year. So I think that'll have more in-depth answers than I'm able to give. But I encourage everybody in the library field to keep asking questions about the climatological impacts. And when you are in a position to be making decisions about AI tools, ask those questions, expect those answers, and let that guide your decision making.
You mentioned more than once, I think you mentioned that librarians should be asking questions to the developers of AI, I guess you could say. And so I've heard that we should be collaborating with AI developers and actually developing these tools. Do you see any value in that? I mean, not that information professionals are like awesome at coding or anything. I'm not against, don't want to offend anybody out there who is, but like that's not our forte, right? Like building AI, but we do have uh, perhaps a different perspective that we can bring to the table. So do you think there's that's realistic to collaborate at that level?
Yes, absolutely, Eddie. And thank you for that redirect. I think my brain might be a little bit in some of the decision making that I've been in this week at work. So, which is along the lines of like, how do we hold companies accountable? But yes, I think that thinking about libraries and librarians as partners in the development of AI tools is the path forward for us, especially when it comes to building tools that are values driven and human centered. Um, I'll actually share, I've got another link for you. Um, so again, also at Harvard, sorry that I am kind of citing them many times, but they're right down the street. So they within the library have been working with the Mozilla Foundation to develop an AI discovery tool. And I think it is a really great example of exactly what you're talking about, Eddie, of libraries and librarians partnering with developers to build tools that are meeting library needs and guided by libraries' values. And something that I'm really excited about that we're working on in my own library is partnering with the researchers at our own institutions, because there's a lot of exciting research happening in AI engineering, especially at tech schools. And I think that we have found AI engineers are really excited about the work that we do in libraries and in a lot of cases want to solve the same problems. So I think building those partnerships is essential, not only to the future of libraries, but to the future of AI, because I think that AI developers and AI engineers need library voices. I think we in the library profession are the people that have our fingers on the pulse of the way that humans seek and interact with information, and the ways to do that ethically and driven by our values.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. There's another question in the chat. How is AI going to change the work landscape for knowledge professions? I think we kind of touched on that in the first question of how libraries are using AI right now, but this is seems asking like in the future. And who is determining the ethical framework for AI software or use of AI? And we touched also on the ethical framework stuff. So maybe the first question, I don't know if you have anything to add to the how's it
Yeah,
going to change the work?
I mean, it's a good question. And I think some of the predictions that I've read, like there is a field of study in the future of work and looking not just at the library profession, but how will AI shape work generally. And a lot of what I see when I read that and when I look at my organization and when I talk to folks that are speculating is that we, as librarians, will use AI as we do other technology tools to solve problems, to connect patrons with information. Um, and I think the things that AI is currently good at, um, from my vantage point, tend to be things that we have backlogs in anyway. And so I can see how um, ethical use of AI in the library profession could set us up as librarians to focus more on the things that really require our skill sets. I guess as a really practical example, one of the things that we're working on at MIT is the use of chatbots, um, but to answer the types of routine questions that we might get 10 or 15 times a week. And right now we answer them, we give the same answers. The bathroom is over here, like this. And AI chatbots could potentially do some of that type of work, not to replace the folks or the labor that is currently doing that, but to enable us as library workers to focus on more complex questions or interactions that require a little more of a personal touch. So it's a little bit hard to predict because, like I said, AI is really just in its infancy, but those are some of the changes that I'm seeing right now. And when we look at things like utilizing AI for descriptive metadata or utilizing it to describe objects in the collection, as somebody who worked in archives for a very long time before my current role, um, I have never been in a library that didn't have huge backlogs of collections and digitization and description. And it's because we are always um, tasked with more work than we have the time and the people and the resources to do. So if there's a tool, an AI tool that can help us work through some of those backlogs by providing some description and enabling us to get content in the hands of our patrons more efficiently, then I think of that as a bonus and not something that replaces the work that we do, but helps us to do it at a larger scale. I hope, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you. Um, I do want to get to some questions that we got from people who registered. Um, have you seen the use of AI in your library enhance or diminish how students think critically? I think we kind of touched on a little bit about the fact that fact checking and not fact checking. So I don't know. Have you noticed that it enhances critical thinking or diminishes it?
So I will, okay, I'm pulling up another link. I will give the disclaimer that because I am the technology director, I'm on kind of the tools and the infrastructure side of the house, and I don't do as much direct patron interaction. That is my esteemed and wonderful colleagues that work on our research and learning team and work as liaison librarians. But I am in conversation with those teams, and it is a big concern. And it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier that patrons, students, the folks that are accessing information, um, it's critical for us to work with them and help build skills in critical thinking and help build skills in discerning trustworthy information from untrustworthy information, and just understanding how the tool that you're using can influence the information that you're accessing. So what I will do is I will share a link to a LibGuide. If you have not yet encountered SpringShare's LibGuides tool, you probably will very soon in your career. So this is a LibGuide that my colleagues on the research and learning team at MIT put together about disinformation, and it has a wealth of resources if you want to dig in deeper.
Yes, thank you. We love the links, by the way, Heather.
I know we're all librarians, like we love links. I'm among friends.
All right. Next question from the registrants. How can libraries help their communities best separate the AI hype from reality and position themselves to use it effectively? Is there AI hype? I don't know. I don't think there is.
Yeah, I feel like I barely hear about it.
Yeah, I don't know what they're talking about, but try. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it actually goes back to the question that you posed to me earlier, Eddie, about, you're talking a lot about holding vendors accountable. What about collaborating with people to develop tools? And I think a great way for librarians to distinguish the hype from the technology is to talk with engineers. Like reach out, talk with people that are developing the technology and talk with the folks that are doing the creative work and the experimental work to build the tools, because I think a lot of the hype comes from the people that are trying to sell the tools. And that's where I see a lot of over-promising and, of all the amazing things that AI can do, and maybe kind of under hyping some of the risks and some of the concerns that we've touched on in this conversation. But where, at least for me, I've always felt I've started to kind of get a handle on teasing out like what can this tool actually do and where do the sources of harm actually come from? It comes from getting in contact with people that are building the tools and developing them. Um, so I think that would be the short answer. And since I've gotten the go-ahead to share even more links, I'll give you one more that I really like.
You're
This
giving us gold, Heather. You're giving us gold.
Well, I know you probably all have theses and papers that are coming up, so the more I can give you bibliographies, the better. Um, this is a journal that is published at MIT by MIT's SERC, which stands for the Social and Ethical Responsibilities of Computing. And they compile case studies on the impacts of technology broadly and AI specifically on society and culture. Um, it's a really excellent resource. I try to at least skim every issue because these case studies are coming from the engineers, the people that are building these tools, the people that are testing these tools, and they're doing it with the desire to understand and expose harms, risks, and impacts. So you're going to find just so many good, so many good things in there. I think I have maybe I'll save it for the end. I have a list of some of my favorite case studies, but maybe I'll just leave it for you all to explore.
Thank you, Heather. We got a really good question in the chat. How do you keep track of all these links? Very curious. What systems work for you? That's very practical. Thank you for that question.
Well, partly it's the old brain, but I also have a very large Google Drive. So, and I prepped for this conversation too with a document with all of my favorite links that I knew I'd want to go to.
Ah, yes. All right. So you got the paid Google Drive, not the 5 gigabyte. Let's see. Okay, there's another question. We probably only have time for one or two more. I've got about 5 minutes left. This question comes in from Means. I hope I'm saying that right. Do you have thoughts on staying grounded while reading the news regarding AI, job markets, and LIS? Any advice on sourcing reliable and informed reports on journalism regarding AI?
Whew.
Hmm.
Let's see, meditation, long walks,
Yeah.
mindfulness, lots of tea. Um, but seriously, like sometimes I find that stepping away from the computer and, as we say on the internet, touching grass is the way that I stay grounded. Um, because it it's a very real thing. I mean, the way that you framed it, AI, job markets, and LIS. I think right now, literally this minute, this hour is one of the most stressful times that I can think of in my career in terms of shifts and changes in the way that we're doing librarianship, but also um, the impacts that we're currently seeing on librarianship from policy change and economic change. I mean, I did graduate from library school, Pitt, also a state school, so state schools are in my blood. Um, I graduated in 2007 and I entered the library job market during the 2008 economic crash. So, it feels a little bit comparable to that. And I think the fact that we are all here having this conversation about the impacts of AI in libraries, that is, I think, the best way to stay grounded and the best way to demystify all of these topics as you shift from being students into entering into the job market. I guess what I would say is AI is a transformative technology. It is going to shape and change the way that we do librarianship. I think some of those ways are going to be positive and are going to expand the scope of what libraries do. Some of those ways are going to really call upon us to be leaders when it comes to values, ethics, and responsible computing. And some of those ways might be frightening and scary. And I think that that's okay to acknowledge too. I think the best way to stay grounded and prepared is to keep having these conversations and to keep asking questions and to keep seeking out information because fundamentally what we do as librarians and what we've been doing for 4,000 years, it's like it's the world's second oldest profession, is shepherd people through the work of finding and utilizing information and using the tools at hand to do that. And we've gone through successive technological revolution after successive technological revolution, back to the printing press, all the way back to like introducing papyrus. And all of them have felt similarly transformative and stressful. So I think connecting with that history, at least for me, is a way of putting things into perspective. Like, okay, this is another technical transformation. We've navigated 500 of them before, and the work that we do is still relevant, important, and necessary as ever. So the more that we keep bravely entering into conversations like the one that we're having right now, the more we will be prepared and you will be prepared as the next generation of library leaders to navigate this current moment.
Thank you, Heather. I do have one last question I want to squeeze in for you. What is your first library memory?
Oh, oh, what a great question. Um, so I grew up in a very, very small town in upstate New York called Liverpool. It's the other Liverpool. And yeah, and my mom would take us to the library all the time. And I remember so distinctly the town library in Liverpool. And I remember in the kids section, because I would have been probably 4 or 5 years old. It's one of my earliest memories, let alone library memories. In the children's section, they had this giant stuffed lion. And so you could pick out all the books that you wanted to read. I almost always wanted to read books about dinosaurs. I still do. You can see my bookshelf over here. 40% of these books are about dinosaurs. I would gather up books and I would kind of snuggle in with this lion, and it just felt like the safest place, but also like the starting point for exploration, adventure, learning about other parts of the world. And so it's one of my fondest memories from my life. And I think that was probably when I started my library journey. It took me a little bit of time to get to library school from there, but that's my earliest library memory.
Thank you, Heather. That's a great story. All right, well, that brings us to our time. I want to thank Heather again for joining us today. Heather, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us. And please keep in touch with us. We have more events coming. Until then, good night, everybody.
So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your semester.